go, do all the things, hit all the check boxes, remember to do all the stuff. All right. Community meeting. First community meeting. Two is starting now.
So, quick question: if I have other customers who are interested in joining, are they allowed to join this meeting? Should I point them to this meeting?
100% open.
Cool.
Considering how Mark is looking here, maybe we should do this meeting an hour earlier.
Friends like you, Luna. Friends like you. Here we go. Retweet. All right. That's done too. All right. I did all the thing. Okay. Excellent. Don't know how which is ridiculous. In like COVID times, I'm usually up at 5:30 or something stupid anyway. Whatever reason, my brain's not working today. Cool. Welcome again to another episode of What's Happening Inside Quilkin for this month. Good to see you all again in the new year. Oh my gosh, tea is so good. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. Okay, stuff to talk about today. I threw some stuff on the agenda. If you don't have the Bitly link handy and you want it, let me throw that in chat. Abe, you are always more than welcome. Feel free to dump stuff in any particular order, even. Actually, I'm going to add the link to it. Cool. What was I gonna say? Brain. Yep. All right. I was gonna say I think we're in like a pretty stable spot for like a 0.3.0 release. What do other people think? I saw a small nod from Aaron.
Yeah, I think, like, yeah, I don't think if there's anything major, like, there's no problem putting, 0.3.1 or something.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we can just do it in a month. I mean, it seems fine. Yeah, I don't think there's anything that's blocking. All right, cool. I'm gonna say talked about in community call. Release. All right, so I'll put that on my list of things to do. Yes, let's do it. Awesome. Boom. I'll put that on my list of things to do. Lovely. That was easy. I actually think, Aaron, you did this already anyway. Was there so
Yeah,
do you want to do some cleanups? Actually, there
there's
are
still
a few that have been
async
open
trait
for a
one.
while. Yeah.
Yeah, and
trait.
the test of command, I'm getting back to that now, but like
Okay.
that's why I've been doing all this tracing span stuff, is because I was telling you I can't figure out why when it runs as a test it doesn't complete, and so this is part of like making it easier to see why it doesn't complete when I run that command.
Cool. If we're happy with theirs, then I am happy with theirs as well. All seems good to me.
I'll probably just close the async trait one though, because I think we can that's very simple. We can just add that back later.
Yeah, I think that's a fair one. Cool. All right. Beautiful. All right. CDDL. I think that is fine. Let me double check that while we're sitting here. Even is CDDL. I think it's not a problem, and I think given it's a dev dependency, I don't think we need to include the source code either. Oh, no, we don't care about that. Binary, the static links, OGB code, and complete corresponding source code married. Okay. Yeah, I think it's fine. I don't see any issue. I'll write a note. I just checked our policies. I think it's fine. So yeah, we can do that as part of the PR. Policies. Let's see. Beautiful. Oh, I really like those flame graphs. That's pretty. Beautiful. And let's say, yeah, that's super cool. I'm excited to play with that. Did you find anything interesting in the flame graph so far?
Only that the proxy is like a very small portion of the overall thing, and I don't know why that is. So like right now I'm going in and adding more spans to figure out where the rest of the processing time is.
Nice. Yeah, so I'm building out some benchmarks that are like as pure as I can make it, just write and just read, and having them sit next to each other, so we can do comparative to see if like one is slower than the other in some way, shape, or form. Because the metrics seem to be a little off. I have this feeling some of that's tied to the fact that on read everything goes through that single channel. We haven't got that multi-threaded as of yet, but I think it'd be interesting to see as well as we dig into it. In theory, they should be the same. So yeah, that's coming soon. I had to work out a clever way of doing that, and I think I have a good thing. This is my first rush benchmark, so Aaron, I'm very excited for you to have a look at it and tell me what I did wrong. That's my stuff. Luna, you have stuff.
I have stuff. Yeah, so let me open up on our side of things. If Yanni left Embark, that does mean we are losing someone that contributed before. I mean, he's obviously not disallowed from working on the project anymore, but he's not doing so in work time anymore. I'll be poking up people from my team to start just to see who has the interest to take over there. It's not much in the agenda, just internal details as far as I'm concerned. But some of the things I'm looking at, and I think I'll start looking at that more closely after 0.3 release is what are we missing to run Quilkin as a load balancer? So we have an internal experiment where Quilkin runs as a load balancer. It works. Now this is of course the bits of, okay, what do we need to let everyone do it? There's a UE4 plugin that I can think of.
Yep.
What else is there that we need to publicize and have?
I think the only thing left on the Quilkin side is the merging the match filter, because that's what. And then on our side, just writing a configuration that uses that match filter. And that should be it. I think that PR. I think I just need to update the documentation and put in I forget the YAML schema version of the config, so that you don't need to look at the Rust stuff. Once that's done, it can be merged. So that should be done this week.
I also figured, what was the word? But I think we document like that we use that schema thing anywhere. I think we just do it. We should probably document that.
Is the match filter what you need to like send the routing token, use the routing token to send things to the right destination?
No, that's already there. The token the matching filter is just more for if you have changes down the line, like you want to have that be forwards compatible. So that, like, for example, if the token that is used is prefixed instead of suffixed, that you can properly handle that. Or yeah, that's a token is like a different length and stuff like that.
Okay. So yeah, then you could say, oh, if it matches like this, use this router. Otherwise, use this. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. You have a version somewhere in there, and you pull it out and then match on it or something.
Okay. Cool. And then on the UE4 plugin side of things, me and Mark discussed separately. Like they already published a UE4 plugin for Agonis, which is just part of the Agonis repo, was my understanding. So we can do the exact same thing for Quilkin, and that shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, I wonder, do we want to have like a subdirectory where we could keep engine-specific plugins and maybe some low-level C++ stuff in or something like that.
Okay.
As a thought.
Yeah, I'm happy just honestly picking up however Agonis has organized it and doing the exact same thing. If it works for Agonis, it's probably going to work for Quilkin, to be honest. Why reinvent the wheel?
Trying to see, what did we do? We have an SDKs folder.
I was gonna say, you're assuming we put a lot more thought into it for Agonis than we.
I mean, no, I'm not assuming you put a lot of thought into it. I'm assuming it's been working for the past 2 years.
It's fine.
But Mark and I tend to disagree about the way things are organized in the repos.
That is true.
Fair.
That is true. We have an SDKs folder in which we have all our different language SDKs. We could do something similar. I think that would be fine.
Yeah, but I'm fine for your take on how we should organize it as well.
I think the only complicating factor we ran into with Agonis wasn't necessarily open source. It was more, how do we do it? So we don't do integrated tests for our Unity or our Unreal plugins. It's pretty much managed by the end users. Some of that's complexity. Some of that's also just managing licenses. I still haven't. Unity's actually an easy one. You can get a build license. We should actually do that at some point. But Unreal,
Unreal's free.
But if it's used for commercial purposes and we're an org, I don't know what the deal is. So I don't know.
The TLDR of the deal is it's free to use for orgs of any size, regardless of income and employees, and there is no cut on anything baseline. But if you publish a project with it, a commercial project, a game, then they take a percentage of the income on that game. I think that should be fine for both Embark and Google. It's fine for Embark because we've already.
So usually, so when the whatchamacallit, the issue was if we had some sort of continuous integration system that actually used the engine. That was where I was like, I don't know what the license agreement requires you to do to use it in a CI environment. For an
it just requires you to, I think, sign a license agreement as a company.
Yeah,
I think that's
sounds like a thing that requires our lawyers to look at.
We have a bunch of lawyers, and it's very likely that something like this has already been signed. So we can easily fix all of this. Yeah.
It never got around to it, and
I know.
And I don't know how it works anyway. So anyway,
is this something we want in place before we put the plugin code in our code base?
I don't.
Are we okay having it without CI?
I think it's fine without CI. I mean, you're using it, so it works. I don't even know how to do CI for Unreal stuff.
With great difficulty.
So we may just put it in the basket that's labeled too hard and just be like, this is fine.
To be clear, we solved this problem internally because we had to, but it's the type of problem that has an entire team working on it. That.
Oh God. Cool. Yeah, that may end up in the too hard basket. It sounds like then.
How does it go?
We people just use the plugin, and if it breaks, they tell us.
Okay. This could actually be a problem that might not be in the too hard basket if you can solve it for both Agonis and Quilkin.
That's true. That is true.
Because that makes it probably less constrained.
That would actually be a fair point. That'd be a fair point. Yeah, I know nothing about Unreal, so
I would say don't listen to him. He doesn't want a challenge right now. It's perk time. Nobody wants a challenge, but we will fix it.
It's fine. It's fine. Anyway, I don't think there's any issue in releasing it. I think that's fine.
Cool. I also want to say on our side, I can't commit because it's another team, and I'm not gonna commit on behalf of other teams. But we do have the expertise, and I can definitely poke those folks to come in and do these things with us if they have the time and space to do it.
Maybe they could also fix the gRPC. I know that's Unity, not Unreal. Either way, there's so many fun engine problems we can solve. And there's also the, sorry, still early. Brain is going.
That's all right.
Should we just move on to the next item, or do we need a second?
Do it.
All right. So And the next thing, like we know what we're missing to run Quilkin as a load balancer. That's cool. What more do we need to run it on an edge?
What makes the edge special? What would you
You
want
might want to have chains of Quilkins. Like if you run Quilkin in an edge location, in all likelihood, what you're going to want is a setup where you have Quilkin on the edge, you have another Quilkin as a load balancer in the same internal network as your game servers, and then you use the internal network to bounce to the actual game server, rather than having your game servers exposed to the internet, but only known to the Quilkins, because that's silly. What do we need to do that? Can we pass traffic from one Quilkin to another right now and have them like, this implies like having a Quilkin on the edge that knows about pools of Quilkins at other locations, and for each routing token knows which pool to go to. And then the load balancer one knowing the exactitude of, oh, this is a game server within my pool, I'm going to send it there. Like, does that work? We also need to avoid loopbacks where a Quilkin that runs as a load balancer thinks a particular game server is in another pool, sends it there, then that one thinks it's in this pool, sends it back, and it just bounces packets back and forth until the end of time, which is nasty. So there's a bunch of things there where I'm like, there's a couple of bits that feel like they're missing to do this nicely.
I don't think there's anything specific to Quilkin that needs to be added, unless you want to be like, we could probably talk about like latency measurement and like that kind of piece that you probably want on the edge, so that you know which pool to send stuff to and stuff. But I mean, there's an orchestration layer that definitely needs to be built so that you know where to send what to where. But I don't think there's anything specific to Quilkin. What do you think, Aaron?
Well, just on that, yeah, there needs to be some orchestration, but couldn't that use the existing XDS stuff for that? Like,
yeah, we'd have to modify it a bit to make it aware of how we're setting up our pools and stuff, but that's not too hard. One thing I'm worried about is network loop prevention. That does feel like something Quilkin should do. If I configure two Quilkins to just send traffic to each other infinitely, I want to, one, be able to notice it, and two, be able to stop it without taking down the whole goddamn pool of both of them. How do I do that?
So that would be like the source is also the destination, right?
That, or bigger loops where, let's say you do a roundabout like Mark just made, where you get game traffic from a game client. Pool A sends it to Pool B. Pool B sends it back to Pool A, which sends it back to Pool B, which sends it back to Pool A. And those packets will bounce back and forth until those clusters are shut down. You can make bigger loops as well, right? You can make 5.
But in that topology, like Pool A isn't aware of where Pool B is going to send stuff. So like Quilkin, the binary itself is not going to know anything. This feels like you need some sort of central system inside your orchestration that's aware of your topologies.
Yeah, the management server can do part of this work.
Yeah, and looks for anything that's cyclical.
There's also options like packet duplication detection, where, oh, I've seen this exact packet 5 seconds ago. I don't know if it is a good idea or not, to be clear. I'm just bringing this up as you have a bigger network graph of different things talking to each other, this becomes a bigger problem. Because at some point it's going to happen and blow up in your face. And the more layers prevent a problem like this, the less likely it is to happen. Of course, the management layer needs to do this, but if Quilkin can also do something,
the more layers you add to that, if you actually end up in the situation, the harder it is to find out where the problem is and debug it. And hello, global outage.
Exactly. This is how global outages happen.
Yeah.
I think at the very least, it doesn't prevent, like, if the source is the same as any of the endpoints, that's not prevented at the moment, but that should be prevented. I'll make it.
That's easy. Yeah. We should do that.
Yeah, we could just validate that.
Yeah, there's also another one like I forget what it was called, but essentially where where a malicious actor actually sends like a bad IP address that essentially causes it to loop back just within itself, like not even talking to a different Quilkin necessarily, but just having it talk to the same Quilkin and having it send it on the same in the same instance. That
Yeah,
also
like
gives
usually it's
feedback.
destination 127.0.0.1
Yeah, exactly. They're
and similar.
Mm.
sending it over the
scenarios.
network, but the packet says that it came from localhost and stuff like that.
Yeah. There's also the same things from the management server. If the management server tells you to send things to localhost on your own port, maybe just refuse.
Yeah, like validate the request. Make it part of validation. Like you can't set yourself as your own loopback device or something.
So no question here. Do you have the equivalent of traceroute for Quilkin? Because that kind of reminds me of a bug I've actually seen and traced at the kind of TCP routing level, where this can happen. Like you get latency spikes between two locations and you don't know why. And that could be a routing table that changed somewhere and now it's routed somewhere else. And you get like tons of loops before it actually comes back. And well, the first thing is it's cool to be able to detect it, but then what if you don't have the tools to actually see your topology, dump it, quickly act on it? So, and the first probably tool you would need within Quilkin to detect that is traceroute. Yeah, like give me all the Quilkin servers I went through and get me kind of from there the topology of what's happening when I contact X, because it's going to be like if your mesh is really big, then dumping the whole topology isn't what you want. You want to detect from A to X. And from there, you're going to get metrics, you're going to get what's going on, you might get loops and so on. So traceroute could be an interesting tool within that, where each Quilkin could just add its span information, kind of how much time, when does it see that packet, where it's routing, how much time it spent. And you get that back after a couple hops, and you'll at some point see loops. That doesn't auto-detect things, but by seeing latency or a request not coming back, you'll at least be able to debug that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So on your question, Mark, I think it's a bit both. Like you can do this with traces for existing packets, right? Sometimes you also you want to send a packet, like you do a ping or a traceroute on the network level, right? And you want to see my packet that I just sent, which route did it just take? And that would require some type of trace route tool. Like
it sounds like it's kind of like, okay, you could set up some sort of distributed tracing, because I think that's useful anyway, so that you have, I mean, you might as well use those tools for visualization because they exist. But if you wanted to be like, how do I simulate it? Like, is there a simulation packet I can send that just goes
not
like,
even, you want to send a real packet and see which path Quilkin decides it takes,
and some tooling around that could be kind of cool.
Your packet.
Because then you could be like, all right, I sent the packet. Now let me go look at my tracing platform, whichever one I happen to use, and I can see the path it took.
Yeah.
That'd be neat.
And also just get output from the tool itself, right? A typical trace route tool will just print
talk
out
to the service and then pull it out and then make it pretty.
This doesn't sound hard, but it's actually pretty complicated. It implies some sort of meta protocol for Quilkins to talk to each other at a bare minimum. Because otherwise, well, they can't do that.
Well, this is where I'm like, if we did, again, if we had some sort of distributed, like we had a distributed tracing system, like Open Tracing is probably the right bet. Which there is a plugin for the tracing library, which is awesome. We and Luno, you and I were talking about this the other day. Like you would have some sort of trace for probably the routing token all the way through, because using IPs and stuff is PII, and that's a whole other issue. But if you had your magic thing, you got your tracing token, and you could see it going through your topology for all the packets that go through your system. One, you could use that as a warning system for like, hey, if you have something that's a loopback, because you could see it in your trace and be able to visualize an alert on that, which would be sweet. But then then Quilkins don't need to know about each other. It's your tracing system that knows about all the Quilkins, and so the complexity for Quilkin, I think, gets reduced.
Are you sure? So I see a couple problems with that. One is a sampling rate. Like this, what you just described works if you have 100% sampling rate. Great. But let's say you don't. Let's say you have a 0.1% sampling rate. Then you start needing to send a special packet that always gets traced or similar. Or how do you see that? Like,
This is an interesting question. I think you're right. I don't think you'd send a trace packet every time, but I think you could batch it per like 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 30 seconds. So you'd still get the data going through.
but that doesn't work for like if you want to trace the path right now, right? Like that.
You'd
that's
send
more
it, wait 30 seconds, and then you'd see the whole thing, or whatever the batch time is. Like I would batch on time. So I'd be like, okay, let's look at all the packets we got in like maybe 5 seconds, aggregate that within that instance, and then send that off to tracing. Maybe is an idea. Because then you're guaranteed to always get the path. It's not a percentage of traffic. Or you do a percentage of traffic, which you could also do, which still means like if you only get one packet, percentage of that is still 1. So you get that.
Well, no. If you have a sample rate of 0.1%, you're sampling 1 in every 1,000 packets.
Yeah,
right?
you could fudge it. Like you'd be like, if it ends up being 1, you could make sure it goes through. Like we could
yeah, like you can do some special stuff,
Yeah.
especially if you have something like a tracing packet where you like always
This is
trace this
special.
particular packet.
You could do something like that too.
I think I'm not sure. It's
Interesting
annoying
question.
to require a separate solution to visualize anything. Like just having a straight up tool that prints out this packet just took
I think
this
that's a
route
great idea.
has a lot
Yeah.
of use.
But also, standing on the shoulders of giants and stuff. Otherwise, yeah, you're right. Quilkin needs to have some meta protocol to know about other Quilkins. And that seems maybe a little counterintuitive to the project to a degree.
I actually talking about shoulders of giants, how does TCP do this? IP packets don't have a meta protocol, right? How traceroute works
How does traceroute
in
work?
IP is that so packets have a allowed number of bounces, right? And if you say, and if you send a packet and it reaches its maximum number of bounces, you get a response back that says, I discarded this packet because it reached its maximum. Can't we do the exact same bloody thing?
Oh.
We can do the exact same bloody thing, can't we?
Well, we
You
don't have
just
any
need a
retry
filter.
mechanism. We could.
You don't need any. Neither does IP. You don't need any. So how a traceroute works behind the scenes is that you send a packet with a maximum number of hops of 1. You see where it lands. You see what responds to you with a, hey, I discarded this. Then you send one with a maximum hops of 2. You see what responds to you with, hey, I discarded this. You send one with a maximum number of hops of 3. You see who replies to you with saying they discarded this, etc. That's how an IP level traceroute works, right? Can't we do the same thing?
Well, if you do that, you're kind of exposing the Quilkin internals and your own setup to your clients.
That's
They
true.
would be-
Anyone can do that at that point. But that's true of
Mhm.
networks in general. So that doesn't actually bother me that much.
I would be a bit worried of exposing all of that, given, at least for me, one of the interesting aspects of Quilkin is kind of creating that black box. They connect to
Yeah.
one. I don't know after that. Hearing you all talk about this, I think I agree that the mechanism behind the traceroute, you could reuse what's probably currently acting as your analytics system that kind of measures how times between ops operate, because that's what you want. At the end of the day, you want to span throughout each thing. If you don't want to actually, I don't know if there's a mechanism right now in Quilkin to say, well, this packet is kind of a special packet, like activate the analytics for it. And I think the answer is no to that question.
I think so as well, yeah. It is indeed no.
Not at the moment, but that would also be, I think, pretty trivial to add, and like something we should add, just like, hey, add in a piece of dynamic metadata when every X packet or just every packet, because that's something you could want for other reasons as well.
I have a concrete suggestion here. So, technical suggestion. Implement a new type of packet called trace. let's say that the packet is literally in UTF-8, the word trace, followed by a routing token, followed by a maximum number of hops. And if trace is on that particular Quilkin, when let me start up. That packet is sent. Each hop that Quilkin sees the packet, it reduces the maximum hops by 1. When the maximum hops reaches 0, let's say we have an IP address in that packet as well. That IP address receives a UDP datagram back that says, hi, trace ended here. If the trace feature is on that particular Quilkin. If it's off, it is silently discarded when it reaches 0, and no response is given back. This lets you essentially define traceable parts of your infrastructure, all your edges and your entry load balancers, while keeping internal network details private and opaque to end users. That gives you the visibility you need to actually build a trace route tool in the first place. Like, just baseline ideas. I'd love to see what people think of this. I am not saying it's a good idea. I'm just saying, off the top of my head, this is what I can think of. This is basically almost replicating what IP does. IP has the same concepts. Like, you have a sender to your packet, and when max hop reaches 0, that sender, not the previous hop, but that actual sender gets a reply back, hey, I dropped this. And you can turn it off for particular parts of your network, and many companies do exactly that for their private networks.
Aaron, would you see that as a config option, or would you like to see that like as a match with a series of filters that's configurable?
Yeah, just off the top of my head, like what comes to mind of how to implement that within the current system is to have a filter at the front that says, hey, attach this piece of data onto the packet, and then you also have a filter that checks for that piece of metadata on every single one that says, hey, is this one here? Okay, decrement it. I think it's relatively straightforward with the dynamic metadata, and just having a Quilkin that picks it up and applies a packet that has the identifier that you can then, other Quilkins can pick up and be, hey, okay, this is the part that we use for the counter, and then they just parse the counter and then decrement it or increment it. So I think it'd be relatively straightforward, but obviously have to try it out.
For whatever reason, I think you could do it. I think the only other concern the thing is, what's the words? Right now, filters can't readily send packets too easily, or like return packets to sender.
But they wouldn't need to, right? Because it's only we're doing this at the instance level, so they just need to append data to the packet that is then being sent off, right?
How does the trace tool get that information back then?
Yeah, it needs it back, right? You need to send the packet back to the originator, which will skip your entire topology, right? Like, you want to send a packet back directly to your originator.
You could create a new socket and just send it back to where it came from, and then close the socket once you're done. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but it's not. Filters aren't really built for.
I mean, you don't even need a socket, right? It's UDP packets. You can just send a UDP packet ad hoc without a socket over or anything.
I don't think. No, I think you still need a socket to send.
It could just change the address that's sending to. So, like, if it runs out of the counter, couldn't it just say, "Hey, we're going back to this place," instead of continuing on?
No, because it goes to an endpoint, and the endpoint determines where it gets sent to. We could work that out.
That's a technical implementation detail, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's something we could work out. And there's also really interesting, like, there's a meta question which I think we've talked about a bit before, of like, if you want to handle something that has a handshake, we don't really have a way of doing that right now. And so there's probably a more interesting discussion, or not more interesting, but a discussion around that kind of topic that would probably tie into this. The only thought I have on this as well is this would definitely be a handy debugging tool. I definitely want to see us lean more, like, how do we do observability on the platform as a whole? And that's where I look more at distributed tracing. We have a bunch of metrics I think are handy, but having that visibility across the whole platform is probably the thing that will enable you to be able to say, oh, actually, I know what my problem is. Now I need this actual tool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Observability tracing is great. It's not necessarily a great diagnostic tool is the problem.
Yeah,
because
no, I agree.
traces
I
have
agree.
sample rates, and when you're wanting to do diagnostics, you often want more, or rather different.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that we need before we can reasonably deploy Quilkin on the edge?
Do you
Observability in general, I'm gonna add.
Yeah, I think
You're not doing that without solid observability.
Yeah. What was I going to say? You and I were talking about right now. I don't think there's a way for us to track sort of ping times between, or just like transfer times between, say, Quilkin instances or Quilkin instances and servers.
This
or
trace
like
packet solves that. The trace packet proposal we just discussed solves
that would actually do the job,
just
wouldn't
measure,
it? It would.
You send a trace packet with hops 1.
Yeah.
And you see how long it takes to get it back.
Yep. All right. Cool. That actually has multiple use cases then in that instance, because you and I were discussing this the other day. You could have it set up so that like every 30 seconds it just sends it through the system and just tracks that data and takes that part of the observability thing. So you have that. Even
better. You can put you can put fake clients at various ISPs and different
and just
locations
try stuff out.
And just measure each
and just measure it,
different...
and then also use it as a diagnostic tool if and when you need it. That's super cool. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, we should write some issues.
This opens us up to like a meta protocol, though. Like this is effectively a meta packet, right? It's not data. It's cool.
The nice thing in here too is, especially if it's a filter and the way the filters are set up, like what makes a tracing packet could be unique. It could be cryptographically generated. So if you were to like expose that to the outside world, if no one else knows what that's a bit of security through obscurity, but like if no one else knows what it is, and maybe it rotates every so often, it might give you some security in that. Like,
I mean, yeah, that makes sense.
You could do some neat things that way if you wanted to.
At that point, right? Like,
it doesn't have to be locked.
Yeah.
Also, just on having meta protocols, I think as long as we have it so that essentially the meta protocol remains within the Quilkin network, it should be mostly fine, because that's kind of what we're trying to do, is like transparent transport, but it's fine if we have bits of metadata between point A and B, as long as when you see it come out of B, it doesn't look any different than when you sent it through A. Unless we said specifically to change it.
Yeah. I think Quilkin itself... Sorry, go ahead, Lynn.
No, go ahead, Mark.
You go.
Okay. So I actually think if we implement a trace packet, we should actually start with discussing meta protocol. Like, for example, say, every packet prefixed with the words Quilkin in all caps encoded as UTF-8 will be considered a meta packet that will not actually be sent to the final game server, or something along those lines, to like start setting up an agreement where if your packet starts with this, it's a meta packet, and then we have a trace meta packet and whatever we come up with later. And then the final Quilkin hop can be configured to drop all meta packets before sending things along to Unreal or Unity or whatever you're using as your game engine, so they don't ever accidentally end up there.
Sort of on that, I think a good question to think about is because we're doing UDP and it is a lossy protocol, like we could have that protocol be the prefix of the packet, which guarantees that it'll basically always be there. Or if we have it as the suffix, it could be lost. And like, do we want to say, well, no, like sometimes it can be, you can only get like so much of a packet, and you might only get everything but the metadata.
No,
so like,
actually, UDP guarantees you either get a whole datagram or none of it. That is a hard guarantee in UDP.
Right, but like we could have multiple datagrams, could we not?
Then you have multiple packets,
yeah,
right? Like,
I guess, yeah.
there's no such thing as a packet that takes multiple datagrams. Then you're talking TCP and streaming protocols.
Yeah, true.
The other thing I was going to say about meta protocols, I don't think that should be something we shy away from. I think we're already down that path anyway. I mean, even down to like whether you prefix or suffix a routing token, like that's kind of the Quilkin meta protocol already. I think Quilkin's really about like you're building up your own protocol within like your set of filters that is particular to how your game works, and because UDP is the Wild West and everyone does it differently, right? Like we kind of have to do that anyway. So I don't think that's a problem anyway. In fact, I think it's hopefully driving it's an attempt to drive an industry towards some stabilized solutions.
In that case, I would like to make a recommendation and say that every packet should be prefixed with a fixed prefix and a packet type. Every packet, including game ones. And then we have a packet type for each of our packets, which we can do things with. And version. And the UE4 plugin or the initial Quilkin or whatever you put at the start can deal with putting those things there, right? If we're going to go that route anyway, and we're already there with routing tokens, like you said, right? So what do we have to lose by just going all the way?
The only concern that I have there is the extra data that's going to need to be there for every single game packet and the extra bandwidth that's going to take. My thought on that is actually
6 bytes.
Yeah, people will complain. You know what game developers are like.
Fair enough.
I love everyone smile. My only thought there is actually probably more of a, if there's no prefix, then we know it's a game packet. If there is a prefix, then it's a Quilkin thing, which we can check for. I don't think that's difficult, but at least then we're not sending extra data.
That makes it harder to deal with stuff like routing tokens and whatnot, right? Because then you have to derive, okay, where's my routing token and all that stuff. While if we define a game packet format, like off the top of my head, let's say it is QLKN for Quilkin without all the vowels, followed by 2 bytes for a packet type. That's 6 bytes. And then like you could have a game packet type and then a game packet type v2 if you ever want to change how your game packets are formatted. And I mean, as long as we make sure that can be turned off, I guess, to keep the people that scrounge for bytes, or however I phrase that, I don't know, happy. Like, or are we going too far if we take it that far?
Are you proposing that those bytes be there and be added by the client themselves?
Yes, the client, when sending a game packet, should prefix every packet with QLKN encoded in UTF-8, followed by the packet type
V1 or something.
The packet type 1 encoded in 2 bytes, and
so then the client needs to be aware of the server topology, kind of. It needs to be aware that there's at least Quilkin running on the other end. I can't
that's already the case.
Make it server anymore. So in terms of development, I'm like, I'm gonna have an if that says when in development mode, I'm gonna talk directly to my server.
This is already the case if you want to use anything beyond Quilkin as a sidecar, right? Though, because you're gonna need routing tokens.
You need routing tokens. So either you need a router, your Quilkin as a client, or have the plugin that works for your engine.
Okay.
But yes, I am suggesting we should think about that.
The one thing I remembered was like, so this is very much in that case, but if someone sent a packet that was the maximum of a datagram, and then we tried to add this, that would then make it 2 datagrams rather than 1.
No, and the packet would get dropped.
Okay.
The packet will just not send. It will not leave the OS if it's too big to fit in a datagram.
Which admittedly we have as a problem anyway with routing tokens. You have to consider your routing tokens. Now, the good thing about that is we make the end user define their routing tokens, so they have to be aware of them. So ideally, it's something they should be aware of, right? Like we're like, what you create your routing tokens, so you know what their length is going to be within your system. If we start adding our own extra stuff that's not explicit to packets, not impossible, but I think it becomes a little less transparent.
So again, noob here. I don't know the details of Quilkin, but and that might be a good thing though. Does the client define? Well, does Quilkin impose a MTU on packets? And if so, then you'd have basically you could define the space for an envelope that at the Quilkin level, you're guaranteed to have this many bytes you can use for envelopes and types and so on. So that could be a way to keep the clients kind of sending naked packets. You would still kind of remove those bytes from them, but without defining something at the client level. So that's something then you can change at the Quilkin level. You can update that as you see fit. It can be reused for different purposes. You don't need to update clients. I don't know if that's any useful in any way with Quilkin.
So just how it works at the moment is it is just the maximum U16 max every time. There is a issue opened up to be like because it's not the max MTU is not always fixed. It can actually be set at like the Linux level. Like you can set the kernel to say, hey, this is the max MTU that you're going to allow. So eventually we probably want to have it so that it just matches that. But
even worse, every piece of networking gear between your computer and the end server can have an opinion on what the maximum MTU is going to be before it forwards your packet or decides to drop it. So your real maximum MTU is, in fact, the lowest MTU between all the hops between you and the server. That is just your actual.
Actually, that would be really useful to have as like a tracing thing as well as part of your packet. Like you send a
really just append bytes on your trace packet, right?
And see what the smallest one ends up getting there. Oh man.
Yeah.
I love
and if we make a tracing packet that allows for unlimited amounts of padding with zeros or something along those lines, you can easily do that with the same packet, right?
To see which one actually gets through. I think what you're saying, Lunar, is a really interesting idea. I don't know if we have a reason to append an envelope right now. I don't know, Aaron, what do you think? That I can think of.
For what purpose?
So if we were to add like a prefix to every packet, I don't think we have a reason to do so right now.
I agree. Right now we don't, because we only have one packet type, game packets. That's it. That's all we have. So it makes sense, right?
True. The other thing, like with what you're building out with the match filter system and like being able to prefix packets and stuff like that, in theory, you could kind of do this yourself if you really wanted to as well. There's some interesting possibilities there.
Yeah, definitely. You could definitely just but I think the thing at the moment is we don't have like configuration for like generating those pieces on the fly from like Quilkin or something. You would have to send them from the client, and then you can just capture the bytes and then say, hey, does this match this sequence of bytes? If so, do this, or else do that, you know.
I was going to say we have an appending filter, but it's static, I think, in terms of like it's not you'd be like, yeah, you could have an appending on the, assuming Quilkin is a client-side proxy or something similar, like on the client side, you could have it set up to say like append this thing or prepend this thing to every packet.
Yeah.
But it's a static.
And the engine plugins we built could have the same
thing
features. One thing that you also need is to be able to strip data off a packet with a filter if you need that. So the final hop can drop those packets. That will be a match filter. Or if you have a game packet type, let's say it's QLQN followed by 01, to strip that off before giving the data to the game.
Our capture bytes will do that, I'm pretty sure. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, for like optionally stripping it, like what we could have is that Quilkin recognizes different types and just says there's a piece of metadata that says what kind of packet it is that you can look at and say, is this a game or a network or, you know, a trace in the config, and then you can say if it is, strip out these 9 bytes or whatever.
Yeah, I guess the alternative is to bake this into the code base itself rather than doing it with filters and configuration. I do not know what approach is best, and I will offer no suggestions because I have not touched the Quilkin code base recently enough. But
yeah, I think we'd have to just look at it and write up some design docs and do some pros and cons.
Just to go back to this MTU thing. Thinking more about like how does it work? Because like for example, like again, UDP's MTU is like U16, but Ethernet is only like 1500 bytes, which I believe is like when you have over that, that's when you're in the risk area of like packet loss and stuff. So how do you know how that works at that transition there from the
I do layer? So a UDP datagram is defined. So a UDP datagram has a length on the IP level. Like a UDP datagram corresponds to one IP packet, and the IP packet has a length. If an IP packet is too long to be sent over the lower level physical layer or any of the lower layers below the IP level, I forgot their names, they don't matter, then your IP packet will become fragmented. And a fragmented packet will only be received by the other end if it can receive all the fragments, is my understanding of it, and otherwise it will be dropped. This is fuzzy networking knowledge of mine, mind you. I haven't looked at this in a while, but that is my understanding of how fragmentation works. If I do a quick Google, an MTU of 1492 is standard for PPOE, which is commonly used, which is why 1500 is risk area, because 1492 is the most you can send overload, which is, by the way, 1500 minus 8 bytes for the IP level things that get added onto your IP packet.
Good.
We have 5 minutes left. So, action. Luna, are you going to write up some issues? I'll give you some
really should, shouldn't I? Yes.
I'll give you some work to do.
Yeah, for things that are tagged with my name, I think it's only fair. I'm really interested in the meta protocol discussion in particular, and I think it would make things a lot easier to diagnose if we have it. So I'll make sure to log all of this.
Cool. We have 5 minutes left. Does anyone pressing concerns, things they want to share, video games they particularly enjoy?
Oh, well, Marcus isn't here anymore, but I'll answer his question from the chat, which is like, isn't a single byte enough for the identifier? It's like, we want to have enough disambiguation that it's obvious that it's Quilkin, because like, if you did something that was like a 2-bit identifier or something like that, like it'd be very easily mixed with real data.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
It's why I said 4 rather than 1, because like if it just happens by chance to hit that, hitting QL, QN or similar string by chance is not going to happen. But other things, it's trickier.
Someone will do it. Gabe's like, yeah, I've seen things. But this is where we like the meta, like some of this stuff might be good to be. That's what I'm looking for. Configurable.
That's why. Yeah, that's why my suggestion was concretely, every packet should be prefixed with QLKN, and if it's not, drop it, like straight up. You enforce that it is there. That's my preference over if there's nothing, assume it's a game packet for that reason.
It's an interesting question. Would you want? Yeah, we should talk about this because there's like, I'm like, would you want your envelope to start with something that's game specific, rather than like per game? Would you want it per client? Would you like, again? But then you end up in a routing token, right? If it's per client, is the routing token enough for an envelope? Because then you know what it is. Like, I don't know. I'm throwing ideas there.
And there's a big issue. People are going to have different opinions on this. Different students are going to want to do this differently. So I suspect that the answer is going to have to be, you should be able to configure it.
Yeah, I also think configuration is, a better value add, because just even for, okay, you've already shipped a game, and like, people who want to just put this in front of a game, like they're not even the developers of the game. They're just hosting these servers and they want to configure it to work like that. Like, Quilkin, if it's configurable, Quilkin can work in those scenarios where if we have this requirement, it becomes more restricted.
100%.
Indeed. Good point. Very good point.
Yeah, I think and like when we look at like the topologies that we have, like the integration options of, you can pick and choose how much you want to do with it. That becomes I think it's a value add than like anything else. You can. It does mean configuration becomes more complex because we're less opinionated, but I think that's probably the ethos that we're going for with the project.
It ends up leading to really complex configs. Not looking at any project in particular, but Envoy. But I don't think we can get away from that.
I don't think so.
Like, if you look at Envoy's config, it's absurdly and annoyingly specific. But I don't see a way around that if we want to support all of these options and having different, like you end up having different hops of your Quilkin network configured differently, right? Like your sidecar is configured differently from your load balancer, is configured differently from your edges.
And
so I don't really see an alternative.
I don't, and I think also this goes to some conversations I've also had where I think this is where we're going to be very different from Envoy, where it does seem like Envoy is more like, okay, let's look at established, like on the UDP spectrum, like let's look at established UDP protocols. That's the thing they seem to be focusing on. Like, how do we do DNS or like Quick or something like that? Whereas we're like, we want you to configure basically your own UDP protocols within our filter and our configuration system. Like that's how and I think that's a big difference.
I'm not sure we need to take it that far. It's something we need to discuss more in the issue, but like there's several options, right? Like you can either, do you want to turn this feature on? Envelopes is now a feature. Like, it works as a filter and you can turn it on or off. And are you in endpoint mode or start mode or hop mode or whatever you want to call them? Or do you want to indeed, like you said, configure your own UDP protocol through the
Which is kind of the same thing. It like you're like, do I want the envelopes? Do I not want envelopes? Do I want a prefix? Do I want a suffix? Do I want to like you're choosing your bits as you go through. It's a choose your own adventure of like how you want to make your UDP protocols work, which I think is super handy.
I think it's super cool. Yeah, I'm more tempted to go towards your suggested approach rather than have things hard coded with modes and stuff. I think it makes more sense and more flexible. And what's going to happen in reality is you're going to hard code that shit in your management server. Right?
Yeah.
You're just going to say in your management server, all my sidecars will be configured like this, and all my load balancers will be configured like this. It just means it. I mean, it's still our problem, right? Because I mean, we're writing the management servers, but like, it lives well at that layer, I think.
Yeah. The only thing I would just add there is like, there's nothing stopping us from also supporting things like DNS and Quick and stuff. That can be like a whole filter onto itself. It's just like what we are trying to provide is for all these options that are like bespoke, and you don't want to write like a whole filter. You just want to say, hey, just append these bytes. Just do this small thing on top of UDP. I don't want to have to figure out a whole protocol myself. That's the value I see in Quilkin.
I agree.
The main value I see in pre-baking it and like have an envelope mode would be that not everyone needs to do this work again. But I think we can provide configuration to achieve the same goal without hard coding.
Yeah, exactly. I think like, well, at least in my mind right now, like an envelope mode could just be a filter called envelope. And it just puts it into an envelope, Yeah.
I like it. I think we're in furious agreement, as my father would like to say. We are past time. I don't want to take up more of your evening. I was going to say my dog is bugging me for a walk, but she's not. She's fast asleep.
I'd like to thank you all for the good discussions, and keep in touch. I will make sure I lock tickets for these things.
Excellent. Wonderful. Stay well, stay safe.